Hi, I wanted to talk to you about my conversion story, and not conversion to a strange cult or anything, but my conversion to breastfeeding. I delivered my first son, and I did not want to breastfeed. It didn't seem appealing, and it hurt, and it felt awkward. I grew up not thinking that breastfeeding was normal. I grew up thinking that breastfeeding was a little weird. And when my baby was born, of course I tried, and I tried for a little while, and again, just really sore, cracked, bleeding nipples. And I just didn't really want to do it, but I knew it was really important for him. And the last thing I wanted to go to was a La Leche League meeting, because of course all the women there have hair underneath the arms and they're breastfeeding 5-year-olds. Now, I know differently now, and those La Leche League people who are listening to this are laughing, or maybe not, with my analogy, but back then that was what I thought. And I didn't want to have women talk me into doing it. I didn't want to do it. I remember even going to a lactation consultant who kind of, again, saw really what I didn't really want to breastfeed. But I went so I could tell people I went to a lactation consultant to say, see, it didn't work. And it just, again, wasn't anything I wanted to do. That baby, even though he was early, I knew it was really important that he would have the breast milk. So I did pump for about 5 weeks. And I didn't have to pump all the time. I'm one of these overproducers. I have short labors and I'm an overproducer. And I'm very lucky that way. And thankfully, I at least pumped for those 5 weeks for my first son. And bottle fed him. I felt like I was a better mom by bottle feeding him at that time. I look back and I know for a fact that I don't have any guilt towards that experience now being a lactation consultant. I have regrets because he threw up the entire day on any formula that we would have him on. He would just vomit. And I remember going to church and he would be in his third outfit by the time we returned home. So I was constantly doing laundry. I had no connection that that formula that he was having was causing the vomiting. His body was rejecting that formula. And he was also had ear infections. He had respiratory issues. He had asthma. He had all those things, all before he was a year. And so I just have regrets. I can't go back and change things now. So my second son comes along early as well, as I've said maybe in other videos. And he was 34 weeks, so he was even younger, and he was sick, and he had a lot of infections. The infection that nearly killed my son was an infection called necrotizing enterocolitis. And that necrotizing enterocolitis has a 50% mortality rate for babies. And yes, so it's a high rate. When he finally got out of the NICU 9 weeks later, and with his life, thank goodness, 2/3 of his bowels were removed. And because of the infection, kept eating away at the bowels. That's what it does. It kills the bowels. So 2/3 of his bowels removed, and a lot of hell from me. And that experience, to this day, I can now talk about it without tearing up and crying about it. But it probably took until last year where I'm no longer crying about it. It was an experience that changed my life, and the reason why I do what I do today. Because when he got out of the NICU, after 6 weeks of 3 huge antibiotics that we don't even see, some of the infection control doctors said that they hardly ever used this antibiotic because nothing was killing this bacteria. He had wound infections, I don't know how many times. He had spinal taps. He had 19 tubes attached to a PICC line at one time. And so, and on a respirator on top of that. And so it was pretty traumatic. And when we left the NICU, we moved away to a new state, down to San Diego, actually. And I went to the UCSD medical library to look up necrotizing enterocolitis. Never been into a medical library before, and nor would I, it's a little intimidating to go to a medical library. I wanted to know what caused this necrotizing enterocolitis, and whether it was my doing, whether it was somebody else's doing, what caused it. And it was a tenfold, journal after journal after journal after journal found that it was a tenfold chance of getting necrotizing enterocolitis for a premature baby if he was introduced or she was introduced to formula. Formula is the reason why we have necrotizing enterocolitis today. So artificial baby milk, that is, some cases I am recommending women buy for their babies if they do not have enough milk for their babies. I had enough milk. I'm an overproducer. This baby of mine should not have ever received formula in the hospital, and he was actually forced to, because he was pretty sick. Instead of giving him an IV, which they should have done, they force fed him formula. And I was pretty mad. I was mad at myself for not advocating enough for my baby to get breast milk. So this is where I come from. So when people don't want to do formula, I get it. I nearly lost my son from formula. And one drop of formula changes the pH balance of the gut for 6 weeks. Now, I'm not telling you that to scare you, because if you are having a baby that's not gaining weight, number one rule in breastfeeding is feeding the baby enough. We need to. So that's, of course, again, we got to get in perspective here. But that's why I do what I do.